Hello, it is Sunday morning, or late morning actually. I'm reading Prelude to the Landing on Planet Earth. I've read it before, but I'm reading it again. I am here at chapter 2, The Forming of the Triangle. In fact, I've already read two readings of this. It's a story about a trio traveling to the Middle East to prevent war. It starts in 1974, but this is published in 1977 by STUART HOLROYD, who describes the happenings at that time. And they're talking about Jim Hutak, who Andrija admired and had been at his lessons and his lectures. And now it seemed that the Jim Hutak episode was fitting in with the unfolding pattern of his life. He remembered that in the conversation over dinner, Lyle had asked Andrija whether he had checked out the geographical coordinates that had been given in the communications Phyllis had channeled as the location of the space being's first landing on Earth. Andrija said he had, and it turned out to be a place called the Tarim Basin, which was to the north of Tibet. This correspondence with Jim Hutak's information could hardly be put down to either coincidence or contrivance, and it was one of the first things that disposed John to believe that the communications might really be from an extraterrestrial intelligence. After a short and fitful sleep, John awoke to the sound of voices downstairs. Dressed only in underpants, he went sleepily down to the kitchen to see what was happening, and was greeted with laughter by Andrija, Phyllis, Bobby, and some other members of the household who were sitting around talking and smoking. He gathered that Bobby and one of the girls had been up in the woods together and had an experience. Well, that's nothing unusual, he thought, but it turned out that they were talking about something else. And now Bobby suggested that they should all return to the spot together. So they all went and put on warm clothes because there was a chill in the night air, and 10 minutes later they were crashing through the woods up the hillside towards the mysterious tower. The time was 3:15. The night was still and brightly moonlit, and at intervals there was a sound like the hooting of an owl. The atmosphere was certainly eerie, but so far as John was concerned, the nature of the experience they were supposed to be having remained a mystery. Bobby told them all to wander around and pick a spot that felt comfortable. Comfortable for what? He wanted to ask, but he didn't want to spoil it for everyone else, so he found a comfortable tree to lean against and waited to see what would happen next. This is Sir John, one of the triangle. Returning to the kitchen, they sat and talked about what it had all meant. Bobby certainly seemed to be profoundly moved. For John, it had been too reminiscent of one of Jim Hutak's crazy excursions. He returned to bed cold and confused, and this time slept deeply and long. The following morning, he wished he hadn't left the gathering so soon, because apparently, shortly after his departure, Bobby had fallen into trance and a communication had taken place. In it, Andrija said, there had been a strong intimation that John was to be the third member of the team. John was disappointed to have missed that, but he didn't have to wait long for a repeat performance. That evening he, Andrija, Phyllis, and Bobby went to Andreja's room, and after Andrija had spent some time tinkering with complicated recording equipment and setting up an infrared camera, the lights were turned low and Bobby settled in a wooden armchair facing the three of them. Slowly he began to count backwards from 31, and before he had reached 10, his voice was barely audible, and he was slumped heavily. Then his head rose, and he appeared to be having some difficulty with his breathing. But Andrija and Phyllis showed no concern, so John assumed that all was well. "We welcome you," said Andrija after a pause. "We come in love," said Bobby hesitatingly. A shiver ran down John's spine. The idea that these words might have originated in a source beyond Earth or in another dimension was awesome. "Korean," begun by referring to a message for Bobby, which apparently had been communicated the previous night, but Phyllis had neglected to pass it on to him, although she had promised to do so. Phyllis explained that although they had all remembered that there had been a message, it hadn't been on the tape when they played it back. "We did not ask the message to be taped. We asked you to deliver the message, Korean said. Phyllis apologized and Korean went on. "We do not ask for your apology. We only ask that this time you will keep your word." So gentle, so loving, but firm as a rock, John thought. He was already impressed. The brief initial exchange implied that Korean knew that the message hadn't been delivered, and therefore must have had Phyllis and Andrija under observation since last night's communication, and also that it had the ability to interfere with the tape recording process, presumably by stopping the tape running whenever there was something to communicate which it didn't want recorded. Korean then announced that some more work was going to be done on Bobby, and that Phyllis should describe what she saw. Andrija asked and was granted permission to take infrared pictures. Then Phyllis began to describe another weird operation in which silver rods and balls went into Bobby's body, and there was wiring all over his face. John could see nothing, nor, he suspected, could Andrija, though he was snapping away with his infrared camera so fast as he could. Phyllis had moved forward a little and apparently encroached on Bobby's aura, for Corin said, "Do not touch." Then 5 minutes or so passed in silence, and Korean announced that Bobby's breathing would have to be stopped for the next part of the adjustment, and to John's amazement, Bobby abruptly stopped breathing and remained immobile and breathless for what seemed an age, but turned out to be just 45 seconds. Then he resumed breathing, and Korean, speaking through him, got down to the business of the evening. "We feel the three we ask for may be assembled. We feel you have done extremely well with no more help than you have asked for. Please do not touch. We feel you have talked. We feel there is a decision the three must agree before we may continue. We feel you have come a long way to reach this decision." "John, you're not aware that we speak to you?" "No, I wasn't," said John in a small voice, momentarily thrown by being unexpectedly addressed by name. "We feel you three are what we asked to be assembled," Korean went on. "We ask that you harmonize, agreed on a direction, on a director. Then we may complete our third meeting. We ask that you three sit as one and agree." "You want us to make that decision now, Korean?" said Phyllis. "We ask that we wish that you take all the time you need to make this decision." So it was decided that the three should adjourn for the discussion, and Korean said that while they were having it, Bobby should ponder the message, which was now repeated, and went on. "To give in humility and to receive in humility is the same. One without the other has no meaning and no purpose. It is no greater to receive in humility and no lesser to receive than to give. We leave now in love," said Korean, and Bobby began to count out of trance. He opened his eyes, rubbed his hands, and looked at them. They felt like wax, he said. He had feelings of tingling, burning, and stiffness in various parts of his body. He pulled up his shirt. There was a red mark and a bump on his chest, and what looked like a bunch of pinpricks where Phyllis had earlier described silver wires going into his body. Andrija repeated the message about giving and receiving in humility, and elaborated on the theme a bit to be sure that Bobby understood its implications. He did, and he was moved. He said, "Last night on the hill, I was trying so hard to find the words to tell. I wanted to give something. I wanted just to give, and it's like that. These things in people really embarrass me. They say, 'That was really wise what you said,' or 'That was really great what you did.' I can't even take credit for being alive. How can I possibly take credit for any of this? For anything I say. I feel like it's not me saying this, because I'm not intelligent enough to say anything that would have any real meaning. I realize that it's not me doing any of this, and I don't really want anyone to say thank you. It embarrasses me, because I know who they should be thanking, and it's embarrassing that they don't know who to thank. After some more discussions of the message and its meaning, they left Andrija's room and went down to the kitchen. At the top of the stairs, Bobby stopped. "My leg feels different," he said. "It feels like it's not mine." He poked his hip with his finger. "It's me up here," he said, then moved his finger down a couple of inches, "but not here." This was his right leg, which had been injured in an accident, and he had been having some pain in it. He tried it out on the first stairs, then ran down the rest. "It feels great," he said with excitement. In the kitchen he sat down and rolled up his trouser leg. He looked at his knee and said incredulously, "I have a new leg. There used to be a scar here, and it's gone." It was obvious, an emotional moment for him, and not an appropriate one to ask the question that John would have dearly liked answered. Had anyone else known about the scar? Would there perhaps be some hospital record of it? Andrija, Phyllis and John had their discussion, which was chiefly about the question of commitment. They shared their thoughts and feelings, both the emotions and the doubts that the situation aroused in them, and John was reassured to find that the others felt about it much as he did. Bobby was recalled, and through him contact was re-established with Korean. Andrija reported, "Our decision was in the affirmative to go ahead and do all that is necessary. The direction we have chosen is to help Bobby along with the areas which have been indicated with his conscious, his physical, his subconscious, and all the things that go to make up his life, to keep him in good form, in harmony and happiness while he does his work. We intend to carry his work to parts of the earth, and to those people who should know about it, in order that proof may be given, so that people may accept your coming and your presence. We realize that sooner or later we will have further discussions, and you will inform us about your plans, and we expect, of course, to meet your people and people from your part. We expect further plans to develop, and we are prepared to follow these out. We have decided rather quickly and easily that I should carry on as the director, based largely on my experience in this sort of situation. That is, in substance, that we have come to in complete harmony, and our faith, I'm sure, will grow as we ourselves get stronger in our knowledge and our convictions, and in our actual operations." Korean had just one small objection to this statement. As the partnership was now cemented and formally entered into, it was not appropriate for Andrija to speak of your plans, meaning Koreans. We ask that this part be changed to our plans. "We accept that as a very beautiful gesture," said Andrija. Korean said, "We come to you with love. We ask much of you. We are now one. We are very happy with the results, with the decisions, with the harmony of the major three, and we thank you." The session ended with an exchange of thanks, mutual compliments and assurances. "This is not the last meeting," said Korean. "There will be more when they are needed. We will meet again in love." It was an emotional moment. John felt moved to say, "I don't know how to thank you enough for this extraordinary honor you have given us to be part of this." But even as he spoke the words, the thought popped into his mind, if this is a hoax by spirits, they must be convulsing themselves at this moment. The spirit hoax hypothesis was his main residual doubt, but it was overwhelmed by the thought that if it were not the explanation, then this was surely the most exciting project to be engaged in on the entire planet at this time. So that was chapter 2. which is finished now, and chapter 3 is A Change of Channels. Have a lovely Sunday.